What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Average American Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Tate. This is the podcast for the average American by the average American. Now sponsored by Israel. No, I'm just fucking around. I'm just kidding. Like I said in the last episode, never let that happen. I'd never do that to you guys. This episode is sort of impromptu, and usually I come in with some kind of agenda or current events or something that has happened that, like, I can point to, but I gotta be honest, this is just like a straight up venting about shit that pisses me off and annoys the absolute fuck out of me. Um, so I don't know how long this video will be, um, but buckle up because it's gonna be pretty expletive laden. Because your grandparents, my grandparents, all these old ass cocksucking dumb motherfuckers that I see online, ooh, do they piss me off. Holy fuck, I can't imagine a more brain dead, unrelatable, profited off of everything and gave nothing ass fucking generation than the goddamn boomers. Holy shit, I fucking. Oh, the older I get and the more I see from them, especially with this fucking war. I mean, it is absolutely the most disgusting fucking thing with how many of these just having no moral ass motherfuckers are cool with just obliterating people, just killing motherfuckers just because. I mean, that's so sad. It really, really fucking makes me angry. And the thing is that most of these people will claim to have some kind of religious affiliation belief, Christian generally, but even if not, whatever. It's like, do you not fear your, um, you know, the reciprocity? I think that's the word I'm trying to use. Reciprocal, but in a large scale way. Either way, the way that comes back to you, not just here but in the spiritual realm. Like, if you're somebody, I'm looking at, Fox News, and say what you want about Fox News, full of old fucking dumb people, but CNN's the same way. So let's be clear on the mainstream medias. If you're someone who watches YouTube and podcasts and stuff like that for your information, then you know that mainstream media is bullshit. I think everyone but your fucking, like I said, your grandparents, even your parents maybe, know that fucking mainstream media is absolute fucking horseshit. So, but either way, I get on Facebook and I see in the comments of Fox News, not only are these people just vehemently supporting Israel and what they're doing, um, but they say things like, okay, so I saw the post I saw that really made me want to sit down and do this tonight and not push it off and not wait on it, um, was about Iran threatening to sink some of our ships. And the first comment that has, like, I think it was like 16,000 likes on it. And, it's a mixture of likes, laughs, heart reacts, all that stuff. But mostly likes. Otherwise, that wouldn't be what's represented. Um, and it says, try it. Ask Japan how it went. And it's like, dude, I don't know about you, in a way, like I've said before, revisionist history is a much different situation. And I'm not sitting here saying that, like, we're the righteous because we look at it and we go, oh, slavery was bad. It would have been easier to let Hitler win so we could put him down. Ask Colonel or General Patton about that one. Um, but either way, like, dropping nukes on Japan was not this thing that should fucking be celebrated. With all due respect to the fact that that was, a defining moment or the defining moment of the war, when we probably really established a precedence of, like, we'll go for a complete and total destruction of your society if you do not relent on what you are fighting for. And I get that, and I understand that in a world war, and especially that world war, it felt much different at the time. Um, Not dissimilar to what seems to be the AI race. So, Keep that in the back of your fucking mind for all that we know about AI and trying to reach, AGI, whoever's the first to get that. But I don't look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki as like these massive victories. What I see it is that we, probably through our own government's doing, we're roped into a war that needed complete and utter destruction for it to be able to come to an end, for total dominance to be established, and you know the actual conflict to be brought to a resolution. And I gotta tell you, that's the worst way that it could have went. I mean, that was a rudimentary. That was the first one of the nuclear weapons. Um, and then you have people who are in the comments section who are just like, well, fuck it, we'll nuke them too. It's like, you have no idea the level of devastation we could inflict with nuclear weapons now. I mean, we have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the Earth like 370 times over or something. And that's just America. That's just us. Not Russia, not China, Pakistan, India, Israel, who denies they have nuclear weapons because otherwise we'd have to break up a pact with them because of the proliferation agreement. But regardless, so we're not counting all these other ones. I mean, we have the ability to destroy ourselves to the full extent that you possibly could, right? I mean, complete and total obliteration, nothing left. This isn't Fallout. This isn't Bethesda's post-apocalyptic nuclear fun place where you like kill some raiders. We're talking about complete and utter destruction of the planet. And it's just one of those things where like they don't understand. They think that there's no retaliation. We've had it so good for so fucking long. And that's part of the reason how this political system has like kind of just devolved into the disgusting shit we have now. And that's on both sides of the aisle. I will always say that. I'm sure you've heard me say that if you've listened to these videos. But yeah, it's... And people will cheer it on disgustingly. As if that's not somebody else's family. Oh, it's over there, it's not over here, so fuck it, I don't care. Like, dude, you're the worst kind of piece of shit fucking person for that. I mean, think about it. And I brought up this point before, and I'll bring it up again, and that we kicked off this war not only by doing a sneak attack on Iran, but also we bombed a fucking girls' school that was attached to a naval base and killed 165 young women and children, small girls. Does it register to anyone? And I'm sure I know it does, because I understand it, and people I listen to understand it, but it doesn't seem like it registers to these motherfuckers. How scorched earth America would be willing to go if that was the case, if that happened somewhere here. Okay? Someone in the comments will make a joke or talk about, school shootings. Listen, completely different situation. That's something you can discuss, but that's not what we're discussing right now. We're simply talking about acts of war and aggression from another country. Things that happen domestically are a completely separate issue from what we're discussing right now. And I'm simply saying that we went to war for 20 years with several different Middle Eastern countries over 9/11, which, excuse me, arguably could have been instituted by our government as well. There's a lot of weird things that's around 9/11 and the 9/11 Commission that we don't have any answers for, that nobody will open up an investigation into. So be that as it may, this whole situation is really just brings out the fucking nastiness that this shit that we call society has fucking devolved into. And it's so hard to want to be associated with these people. And like I said, it's both sides of the aisle. You celebrated Charlie Kirk's murder. There was a ton of liberal people who celebrated a man being murdered and shot in front of his family. It's not about whether you agree with his politics or not. And he never said nobody had a right to live. He just disagreed with the way you lived, which is fine. That's what a free society does. And, you know, it's the same thing as like trying to say that Iran can't have a nuclear program of any kind. Yeah, we don't want them to have nuclear weapons. I get that. It's a, you know, state-sponsored terrorism, da 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 da. I get all of that, okay? But just as a fact of like powering your society, a 3% nuclear program of enrichment that simply provides power to like, you know, schools, hospitals, infrastructure, all that kind of shit. Like, that makes sense. I'm sorry, there's some kind of sovereign right that is inalienable that a person who has access to the ability to do so should be able to provide that energy for themselves. It's reliable, it's cheap, it's renewable. You know, it's the way that I think we'll eventually move as a society is to nuclear energy. And so, you know, you started there with no enrichment, and then, you know, I love my parents and I love, you know, other people that are around me, but it's like they're like, oh, they were enriching up to 60%. It's like 60% is equivalent to the atom bomb we had when we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know what they'd do? They'd make a decent crater in a city, and then we would completely obliterate them off the fucking map. Like, they don't have what we have, and they're well aware of that. But there's something about the fact of our president coming out and saying, I'll end an entire civilization. I will destroy their entire bloodlines and decimate their oil fields and all this stuff, which, by the way, we get a lot of energy from Iran itself. So destroying this entire nation would upset the ecosystem we've created in ways that cannot even be foreseen on any scale. You couldn't even fathom probably the ramifications that would come from something like that. But not just that, but this moral and spiritualistic precedent. And listen, I'm not a Christian or anything like that, but I do consider myself agnostic, and I do think that like there is some kind of divinity that powers a lot of this shit, although I don't know its purpose or motive. And I do find a lot of the statements made by people who are of faith to be quite contradictory in a lot of manners and factors. And so that's probably why I've never committed to anything. But there is something to be said about, I personally believe in a karmatic balance and like eviscerating an entire civilization of people because they won't do what you say. I don't know about you. That sounds pretty satanistic to me. If that's, you know, the baseline we're going to use for evil. And it just seems, sorry, struggling. Tough day at work. But it just seems, I don't know, insane to me. It really does seem insane to me. As someone who considers themselves non-confrontational, and I really try to de-escalate when possible. I believe in diplomacy. And I think that's like the most important step. And it really says something for the fact that they spent 21 hours in negotiations and they came out of it with nothing. That felt like just a show. Like this was theatrics. We never intended to actually accomplish anything. We just wanted to show we were trying. So then when we start bombing them again, we can say, well, look, we tried. Like that's what it always seems to be. And then you have this video that just came out not that long ago. Although I saw a timestamp that said April 11th, 2024. So I need to look more into that because they're saying it just happened, but then that timestamp said it happened a couple years ago. Who really knows? But of Israel blowing up a school in southern Lebanon, a high school in southern Lebanon. And without any actual way to verify any evidence, because none of us are there or anything, you have a ton of people who are already jumping in to say, like, oh, it's, it's filled with ordnance, they don't just blow up like that. And it's like, well, if you hit a school with a fucking missile, I think they tend to blow up, pretty spectacularly. So it's hard to think that wasn't what really happened. And at the same time, it's like, if that school was full of missiles but also children, would it be justified? Is it justified the same way it was justified in Gaza, and the way that a lot of people have turned their back on that? I mean, it's interesting because I watched some guy was breaking down what Tucker was saying about, Trump and all of that, the stuff related to his post, and his post with the picture of him of Jesus and all that kind of stuff, which I'm not going to get into because I'm not a theologian. I do find the theologies interesting, especially when people use it as a justification for heinous acts. But this guy was, trying to pick apart what Tucker was saying on I won't say on a moralistic level, in a scriptural level, like literally pointing to other scriptures and simply saying that, God's promises are just that. They're not conditional. And I'm sorry, but it's one of those things where he pointed to Romans 9 through 11, where it talks about the branches of the olive tree and some have been broken off, but it's not permanent, it's temporary. But how do we determine what is temporary? And obviously, I guess if you're a Christian and you believe that, it would be for God to decide that. But I find it incredibly difficult to think that God is okay with murdering children. I don't know about you, but that just, on any level, for any religion, the murdering of children just does not seem like something God would condone. I mean, we all understand that any type of child abuse, whether it be physical, sexual, psychological, is of the worst and most heinous things that a person can do on this fucking planet. And yet, there's entire sections of our country, be it small, or, even marginally reasonable. We'll say that, a 15 to 20%. That's still a fifth of the pie, man. That's still a fifth of the pie that's like cool with fucking shooting and blowing up kids and shit. And mothers and families in general. These people have every right to live as the same as we do. It's different if they tried to invade, or like with the 9/11 thing, even said I have my reservations about that. But even if you say, okay, that happened, that was a terrorist attack, we went to war over it, like, all right, I guess there's some kind of precedent there, although I always argue for de-escalation after, justice has been done. And unfortunately, our arm of justice never is done, according to the fucking government. Military-industrial complex, and as the more I learn, also the Jewish state. So, at least when it comes to the Middle East. It's not like they, convinced us to go into Vietnam. I don't think they were doing that then. They were dealing with, the Yom Kippur Wars in, 67. So, that wasn't them then, but regardless, there's this weird demoralization, where we just and a dehumanization, where we stopped looking at each other like people, because we don't have to. The internet, I blame a lot. Even this avenue that I use to spread my thoughts and my ideas and shit like that. It's very saddening to know that because you don't see someone when you say something, it's you become so vicious about what you say. There's comments I've said that, even I could admit for myself that I probably would be much nicer in person. Now, there are times where I've definitely called someone, the lowest level IQ retard that I've ever encountered and a piece of shit, and I would say that to their face. Because I don't think that's that bad, But I've said things that I wouldn't say to people, I think, in person in such an aggressive tone. And I get it, we all act out of anger, but it's much different to do that in the moment than for this kind of weird internet cycle we have, where people do that every day, all day. And that's why you end up celebrating a murder of Charlie Kirk, because I disagreed with him and anyone who agrees with him, and that makes him a terrible person, and if he's a terrible person, it's okay if he dies. On a ideological level, it's different if you say oh, well, that guy's a serial killer. Then yeah, I'm not gonna argue with you there that guy probably had it fucking coming, and his death is a benefit to society. Child rapists, all that stuff are politicians. I could use a few specific names, but I won't. I think we all know who they are. And if you don't, highly encourage you to look into who's really about a death cult. Some guy from South Carolina and another senator from, I believe, Florida. Florida. So just look into who those guys are. Um, but you know, there's this just section of people who don't have an identity. And so their identity becomes whatever the person that they latched themselves to becomes. Like, you have a certain section of people who, even though the Biden administration was doing terrible and the COVID vaccines were fucking bullshit, and I just read this that Bayer Monsanto, because Bayer bought Monsanto, had a product in the 1980s that they patented for GMO crops. They're suing Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson for royalties on the vaccines. You know why? Because they used this fucking patent, this GMO crop patent, in the COVID vaccine. And I don't know specifically what it is. And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter what it specifically is. Because the statement alone is enough to bring outrage. And I've talked about it before on this, and I've been meaning to do it, and I really should go back and do it, but I probably won't. But Gavin DeBecker, who did an episode on Joe Rogan, who talked about how bad the vaccines are and how bad the healthcare system has been. I mean, he pointed out the fact that there's a liver enzyme from sharks called squalene that's put in childhood flu vaccines, as if that's what they fucking need. And don't try to come at me with some kind of fucking scientific application for shark liver enzyme. I'm almost certain we don't need it. I don't think that people, way back when, were using shark liver enzymes to fight off, respiratory disease and shit like that. Just doesn't say. I don't see what the practicality of it is. And you're gonna argue like, oh, you're not a medical doctor, da 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 da. That's fine if medical doctors were really medical doctors, but they're fucking pill pushers now. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much. I want to stick on the point I'm talking about because it really does upset me to see that there's an entire section, and maybe it's because these people are so close to dying themselves, they just don't give a shit. But it just seems to be like this weird section of like old people that just are like, fuck it. Bomb anybody who isn't here. Do whatever you must. The guy in charge that I voted for, that I have my whole ideology around, that I put a sign in my yard and I put signs in the middle of the woods in rural fucking places. All of the rural Midwestern states. That Trump take America back. Like, yeah, he took America back and then took it back to when we were doing fucking crusades, it feels like. And so it's both disgusting and depressing, and I just pity these people. Because if you were to try to have an intellectual argument with them about policy and all this shit, I mean, they're going to just repeat the dumb rhetorics they've heard on all these mainstream state-run media. Like, they have no independent thought, and I feel like while that may be an easier existence, it has to be like a rough one. That, you only surround yourself really with people who agree with you, and you never have someone you don't agree with, and you don't like to discuss the topics that maybe are uncomfortable. And, anybody who doesn't agree with you is like a liberal idiot. Or is, like a fascist right-wing conservative. Like, either level of extreme that you say, like, because they don't agree with me and my opinions, they're this horrible fucking thing. And it's like, most of us are probably somewhere in the middle, other than those extremes that really don't have an identity outside of politics. And, you could say that, like, I'm sharing in that because of what I do. This is my free time, and I do this in my free time, but the reality is I do this because I think it's important to put ideas and create conversation. I don't do this because I think politics is the only thing that matters. I have so many other things that matter to me, and my family being one of them, and my wife, and those immediately close to me. But this does matter. This is a large part of what I think matters to me because, like I've said, I see this de-evolution almost of us, like, turning back into barbarians or maybe we never got out of the barbaric stage. I don't really know. But, being barbarians with like the most catastrophic weapons, with shit that could absolutely shake the foundations of the planet. And that's scary. That's fucking terrifying, bro. And it's not just our guy. You've got the other ones too. India and Pakistan sit on tumultuous ground and do not agree on absolutely anything. They fucking hate each other and their neighbors with nuclear weapons. That's so bad. That's such a bad thing. So it's like, all of this other stuff is so bad, we don't need to egg it on. You know what I mean? And as you've seen, there's limits to our power and what we can do. And if we were to ever take the lid off that cookie jar, I don't think we put it back. We don't have the power to put it back. Okay? Mutually assured destruction only works as long as everyone agrees not to do the destruction. Once one does the destruction, I think everybody just kind of follows suit. It's a domino effect. You go, well, you fucking did it. I'm going to do it. Fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, there's this weird thing when people get together in large groups, that hive mind state. God, I can't remember what was it the Stanford prison study? Where they took people and they put a man in a room and they took individuals and they put some guys in lab coats and they weren't even really scientists. And they put a man on the other side, you couldn't see him, but there was a button. If you pressed the button, it would shock him and it would hurt him. And they would keep telling people to keep going. Like, they would hear on the other side someone yell, but they would keep going. And it was a disturbing amount of people who ended up killing that person. Now, they didn't really kill that person, but they thought they did because someone told them to do it. So there's like this easily manipulative psychological state that we enter when either someone of authority or a group of individuals approach us and give us an idea, and it's something that like seems new and fresh and maybe exciting to us, and we're like, yeah, that thing. Or it's more like it feels official and, it's law-abiding and you've been taught to exist within the system, so you kind of just do what the authority figure says. And it's a dangerous precedent, man. It's a dangerous fucking precedent that we're setting. To say that, like, complete and utter destruction of a nation is something you just casually throw out on the internet. This is an old man, someone who's supposed to have wisdom who lacks it, clearly. So, I think that they're really, and maybe that in part it speaks to why there's been some spiritual revolution. I've heard a lot of people talk about the spiritual revolution and people coming back to Christianity and stuff like that. And maybe why I've become interested in it, although I still have my major gripes with a lot of the, theological stances that they sit on that I just vehemently think don't make any sense. And no one can actually, that I've been able to talk to, and I haven't really gotten a chance to discuss with theologians or any kind of theologist for that matter, these questions I have. So maybe they could explain it. I don't know. If you want to get me in contact with a theologist that I could talk to, maybe record it, would be super cool so that I could ask these questions that maybe somebody else has. But there's just a lot of things that surround that I have questions about. But there is something to be said for the fact that there's two sides of that coin where there's a lot of people who are, seeking that spiritual healing, but also these people who have had it so good for so long that they just can't step outside of themselves and see that, like, oh, I'm actively encouraging the decimation of someone else's family. I wouldn't feel good if they blew up my daughter's high school, but because they're on the other side of the planet, way far away from me, and I don't have to actually see it, I don't give a shit. Fuck it, kill them. And I think, the military-industrial complex has done a hell of a number on a lot of people and just constantly cycling through wars, and it just feels never-ending, and we're always in one, and always policing and all this kind of shit. And so you get kind of conditioned to believe that we're always the good guys no matter what we do. And I hate to tell you that it just feels like the last several times that we've gone to war, we are not the good guys. And I did on my last episode about the U.S. and the Middle East and the funding, what we did for the Iran-Iraq war, and then what we did to Iraq in defense of Kuwait. which was only in relativity to fucking Britain and not for our own interests and what we did to Saddam Hussein, who was a piece of shit. I'm not defending Saddam Hussein. Horrendous fucking human being. Everything he got, he deserved, and probably deserved significantly more. And he's probably rotting somewhere, wherever it's at that he goes, or we all go. But regardless, it's particularly important that we start really holding each other accountable and start calling each other out for how deplorable some of this fucking behavior has become. Because I don't give a shit if their opinions are ones that I think are absolutely insane. Like, giving 12-year-olds mastectomies before they even have a chance to develop, or allowing people to transition before they hit puberty. I still don't wish death on that person. I do not wish for them to have any sort of influence or power. I wish for them to stay centrally with their own ideas in their own little bubble, unable to influence anyone else and or project that onto any of my nieces, nephews, or anyone else's fucking children. But I do not wish for them to die. I do wish to be able to have a conversation, And the thing I think that I've learned, that while it's so infuriating to have the same conversation over and over and over and over, and I get it, that you just feel like you're beating your head against a wall, there's a time in everyone's life when they come to realization. And, as I've gotten older, the revelations from stuff I learned when I was younger that I really didn't grasp the concept of, now I do. Things my parents told me or things that I learned along the way. And so I just hope that someday, like, the things I've given to my nieces or my nephews or random individuals that I've come across that I've had conversations with, or people online that I can have a reasonable conversation with. Don't get me wrong, sometimes I get vicious. We all have a mean streak. Let's grant each other some grace. But I try to genuinely have reasonable discussions and ask questions and stuff like that to people in comment sections if I can help it. Because I think, public discourse and amicable public discourse is our most valuable weapon against what appears to be a tyrannical oligarchy that we are living under. The only difference is we've got like 20% of the population that had it really fucking good, and it's not even gotten bad for them. They still own their house. They can still do whatever. They still have retirement, all this type of shit. And then of that 20%, you have the 1%, and then somewhere in the middle is about 30%, and then the other 50% are like well below the means. And I get why those people would vote for somebody like a Zoran Mamdani. But that's a false idealism. That will not bring you the prosperity you seek. What will bring you the actual prosperity that you seek is disengaging from what they want you to do. Disengaging from the political system. Don't go vote at the polls. Give record low turnout numbers for voting. And I mean that. Because that's the thing we... And you would need a legitimate economic blackout of some time where we all can come to agreement that no matter what side of the political aisle that we stand on, we do agree that we have to do this thing so that we can actually make an impact, because dollars make the most impact. And when that happens, I don't know. And generally in history, it almost always happens too late. But I'm going to keep talking about these things because this is what sits on me day to day. And I hope that we can achieve some kind of, universal cohesion. And I don't imagine it will be everything, but over the most important things, the macro ideas that we all possess, that we can come to a universal cohesion and reestablish our dominance over the hierarchy that looks to dominate us. I don't have a problem working hard, but when my money is going and taken from me and I'm not able to do what I want with it all the time, and a bunch of it is taken from me to go kill people in other countries, I kind of genuinely have a fucking problem with that. So, I guess that's where I sit with it. I hope that if you're watching this video that you have some moral values and you don't think that, the murdering of innocents is justifiable And I hope that if you are someone who has, some kind of religious denomination, that you seek out in yourself to ask yourself about whatever religious entity that you submit to, whether or not they would approve of the actions of those around us. But, hey, on the brighter side, it's starting to get warm. Sun's coming out, and I gotta be honest, that does make me feel a little bit better day to day. It's a little bit, it's like a fucking, like a half to a degree and a half better than what I was. Because when you get that seasonal depression, that shit's fucking killer. You know what I mean? Fucking gloomy, dark days, and then all this shit, and then fucking Alex Jones style. And it's just like, oh, fuck, bro. So the sun makes it a little bit better. I hope you guys are outside enjoying the sun, basking in that shit. Going out to eat, watching a movie, playing some video games, doing some shit to take your mind off of all this crazy shit. But don't forget, join me back here for the next episode. Hopefully it'll be Iran and U.S. Middle East policy part 2, but it may be one of those kind of off episodes I've been talking about doing lately. So not sure yet, but appreciate you guys for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, share, tell your friends. Maybe tell your grandparents. Not sure they know what YouTube is. All right, guys. See you. Peace.